I want to talk this afternoon about the way we classify and divide up the nature of reality of the human organism according to the system we call Abhidhamma. In the Buddhist scriptures, there's one collection. It's called the Abhidhamma. It's one of the three baskets. And it's particularly analytical teachings that are very precise, very technical, and detailed. It represents really one of perhaps the oldest comprehensive psychological systems in the world. And it goes beyond just psychology. It's also metaphysics and philosophy and so forth. The traditional story of how the Abhidhamma came to be is that the Lord Buddha spent one rainy season teaching the gods in Tawatingsa heaven. And every morning during the rainy season, while he was up in the Tawatingsa heaven realm, he would return to earth to go for alms round to get his daily meal. And then he would meet with his elder disciple Sariputta and give Sariputta a brief synopsis of what he had taught the day before in the heavens. And this was taken by Sariputta and became the Abhidhamma. So this represents the very high regard the tradition has for these teachings. And the essence of the story is that the Abhidhamma is kind of the watered-down synopsis of the teaching that the Buddha gave to the Devas. That this is like the human, for the dumbed-down version for the humans. The whole collection of the Abhidhamma texts is quite extensive, and there's a lot to it. But what I thought I'd focus on today is the one aspect of the fundamental classification or breakdown of reality. And according to this system, everything that we are, that we know and experience can be classified broadly into four separate classes of phenomenon. And these are Citta, Cittasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. Rupa is the body, physicality, matter. In terms of a human organism, it's the body, and more generally, it's matter or solid substance. Citta and Cittasika are two aspects of mind. Citta is the subjective aspect of mind, and Cittasika is the objective aspect of mind. And Nibbana is the unconditioned. The first thing to understand is that these four categories are quite discrete. These are the fundamental building blocks. None of the categories can be reduced to the operation of the other categories. So this is philosophically quite separate from, say, a materialist view, which says matter is primary and that mind is a product of physical process. The Abhidhamma says mind is quite separate. Bertrand Russell, one of his aphorisms was, "What is matter, never mind. What is mind, doesn't matter." Mind and matter are quite distinct. And not only that, but the two aspects of mind are quite distinct from each other. And this is very important when we're trying to examine, understand our own inner workings, to understand the components of mind. To begin with the body or matter, rupa, in the Abhidhamma system is divided again into four elements. And the elements are to be considered as qualities. rather than as substances. And the names are earth, air, fire, and water, but those are not to be taken literally. They're mnemonic labels to indicate the different qualities. The earth element is the element of solidity, or the taking up of space. Water is what apo is the Pali. Water is that which provides form, shape, because the image is like water flows into a vessel. It takes the shape of the vessel. Air element is that which produces motion. And this was in ancient times, this was taken fairly literally. There was, I would say, like a pneumatic theory of physiology of how the limbs moved, is that air element would pump into the arms or legs, causing them to move. Fire element is energy. It's the energetic quality. One of the traditional forms of meditation is meditation on the four elements. And one very simple and effective way to do that is a simple meditation I'll give you. You can try later at home. Is, if you're interested, is a walking meditation based on the four elements. You divide the step up into four component parts and notice that quality that is prevalent in each part of the step. Lifting the foot from the floor is fire element. It's energizing. Right? Then pushing the foot forward through space is air element. Then settling the foot down is water element. Then pressing the foot into the earth is earth element. And then you do it again with the next foot. This is actually quite an effective meditation if you are bothered by a busy mind, because it keeps your mind busy keeping track of where you're supposed to be in the step. Yeah. So it's fire, air, water, earth. And various combinations of these four elements make up all the physical structures of the body and of the world. Then the two mental factors, citta and cittasika. Citta is that which knows, is the subjective component of mind. It's that which experiences and knows objects. And it's extremely simple in that regard, in that this is all it does. It's elusive, difficult for our understanding because it is so simple. It can't really be understood easily by trying to analyze it. Like a fish can't understand the nature of water, because the citta is present in each moment. This is how we experience. It can be analyzed in terms of its various functions and attributes moment to moment. Abhidhamma classification for citta is quite complex. There are 89 different kinds of citta, and in the Abhidhamma it's always considered, analyzed moment by moment, the citta arising in a moment to an object. If you look at books of Abhidhamma, there'll often be like diagrams, charts, cross-referencing the different sort of ways of analyzing citta. One of the ways is by the ethical quality, whether the citta is skillful or unskillful or functional. And those are for volitional moments. And then there's resultant moments that are either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And another form of analysis that cuts across that is into four planes or levels. There's the sense desire realm, the realm of form, the realm of the formless, and the realm of the unconditioned. And various kinds of sub-groupings in all of these bring out 89 kinds of chitta. And the chitta occurs in a sequence. When we cognize an object, when we know an object, there's a fixed sequence that the mind goes through of averting to the object and taking the object and registering the object. And this varies with the situation. It's quite complicated, but there can be as many as 17 steps in the sequence. One of the practical aspects of this is to do with the degree of clarity of awareness that is present in the mind. If the sequence is aborted before it completes, then the mind is muddled. It doesn't have a full comprehension, a full taking on of the object. If the sequence goes to completion, then there's a moment that's called Tadara Mana, which means registration or putting away. You can consider it's like the mind has taken the object and now it puts it away in the filing cabinet. It's done with it, but it's registered. If the mind is muddled, it doesn't get that far in the sequence, then the moment is lost. It's forgotten. It's only stored in memory and retained if it's clearly seen and taken to the full sequence to registration. So I like to say one of the little practical applications of that is if you are the kind of person who often can't remember where you put your pen or your keys or your glasses or whatever, that's because when you put it down, you weren't being fully alert and mindful, so that it wasn't registered. If you put something away at the moment with clarity and mindfulness, you don't need to make a special effort to walk around thinking that I put my pen on the counter. I put my pen on the counter. If you do it mindfully to begin with, it'll be there when you need it. When you go to look for it, it'll just come to your mind immediately. So although chitta has all these various modalities, it is in its essence extremely simple. It's just the knowing, without any admixture of emotion or processing. This occurs in the category of chittasika. The word chittasika derives from the word chitta. It means along with chitta, associate. So sometimes it's translated as mental concomitants. This is the objective aspect of mind. And these are all the processes that the mind goes through, thinking and emoting, cognizing, perceiving, all the kind of processing of the raw data that is provided from chitta. The standard list of the chittasikas is 52. They list 52 different chittasikas. And part of the system is to analyze which ones occur together and with which type of chittas. And again, it's quite a complex system. At some point in the history of the development of the Abhidhamma, the system was closed. The earliest text, the original Abhidhamma text, they list various chittasikas, mental objects, and at the end of the list it says, and whatever other states may arise at that time. And then in the commentarial period, in the Visuddhimagga, when they list the mental states, one of the subcategories is which when I first encountered this, I was completely baffled by what it meant. They call them the or whatever states. And I forget the Pali for that, but it derives from that phrase from the original text saying, or whatever other states may arise at this time. Somebody in the commentarial period decided to close the book on it and list the other states and say that's it. So the final list comes out at 52. And this is in the Theravada system. In Sarvastivada and other systems, slightly different. There's longer lists, slightly longer lists, but we have 52 states. And these are categorized in various ways. one of the most important is there 7 of these states are called the universals because they arise in each moment of consciousness. Every moment these occur. And these are, first of all, contact. Pasa is contact, which means the mind contacting an object. It's a coming together of various factors, coming together of consciousness, sense organ, and object. So this occurs in each moment. There's a Vedana, which is the feeling tone. Whenever an object is encountered by the mind, it is felt to be either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And this is the underlying basis of all our emotional life, is Vedana. We have quite complex emotions, but they're all based on this very simple reaction to objects as being perceived as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Sanya is a universal. Sanya is perception. As I said, the chitta is very simple. It just takes in a raw experience with no analysis. For example, chitta operating through the eye consciousness, it doesn't see a chair or a table or a man or a woman or a dog or a tree. It sees only color and shape. That's all it sees. And then that information is taken by perception, sanya, and these various objects are recognized to different degrees of refinement. So sanya occurs in each moment, and it's very hard to distinguish experientially between consciousness and perception. They work together so closely, but they are separate functions of the mind. Then there's cetana, which is volition or will, intention, as a universal, and ekegata, which is singleness of mind. Now this is interesting because, significant because ekegata in other contexts is one of the jhana factors. When it's developed to maturity, it's a very high degree of samadhi. It's a unification of mind. But the meaning here is that in a single moment, the mind is perfectly unified. Because in each moment, you're taking a single object. And this is one of the fundamentals of Abhidhamma psychology, is the idea that the mind at each moment is taking a single object. So if you were quick enough to notice your mind moments, you would see that you actually don't, for example, hear and see at the same moment. You're flitting back and forth. You think you're watching, you're looking at me as I speak, you're hearing my voice and seeing my face. You think you're doing that simultaneously, but in terms of absolute mind moment analysis, you're flitting back and forth between the mode of seeing and the mode of hearing. So ekegata is the unification of mind. Jivatindriya is life faculty. It's that which separates living beings from non-living beings. And an interesting side note here is in the Abhidhamma system, plants are considered to be, they're called one faculty beings because they have jivatindriya, they have life faculty, but they don't have consciousness. So this is separate from consciousness, whereas animals and humans have life faculty and consciousness. And this permeates the whole being. We're alive because of life essence. And the final universal is manasakara, or attention. The analogy given is like the rudder of a ship. It steers the mind towards taking this or that object. Like in each moment we're taking an object, and this is the factor that determines which object we take. It's the guiding, the steering rod of the mind. So all these factors at minimum occur in each moment, and others as well, various wholesome or unwholesome factors. One of the benefits or advantages of studying Abhidhamma in detail is that sometimes by looking at the details, a truth can emerge that has a practical application. For example, the mental quality, the feeling, Vedana, of unhappiness, mental unhappiness is domanassa. It never occurs in a skillful mind moment, which means it's never spiritually advantageous to feel miserable. It's always associated with unskillful mind states. You have to be a bit careful to take that teaching on board. Don't use it as a additional way to punish yourself. If you're feeling sad, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means there's no advantage. There's no advantage ever to being sad. No spiritual benefit comes from it. It's not associated with skillful mind states. The quality of joy can be associated with skillful or unskillful states, as can equanimity. What I'm talking about is really just brushing the surface of this topic. It takes a lot of study to get a understanding of Abhidhamma, but it's very useful to get a framework. And particularly if you are interested in pursuing insight meditation of any kind, of vipassana, knowledge of Abhidhamma is a very good adjunct to that. So it's not accidental that in the Buddhist countries, Burma is known for both Abhidhamma and Vipassana. These two go together. This is what Burmese Buddhism has specialized in over the centuries. There's an old legend that at some point in ancient times there was a ship coming from India taking the scriptures to Sawanabhumi, the Golden Lands of Southeast Asia. And there was a storm at sea and the ship was lost, but it was like 3 lifeboats made it with parts of the scriptures, and the suttas went to Sri Lanka, and the Vinaya went to Thailand, and the Abhidhamma went to Burma. There's no historical basis for that story, but it's kind of an interesting legend. There's another story about Sariputta taking the teachings, the Abhidhamma teachings from the Buddha. After he got them from the Buddha, he recited them to his 500 disciples. And they were the beginning of the Abhidhamma tradition. And the story is that those 500 monks had been bats living in a cave at the time of Kassapa Buddha, previous Buddha. And there was a monk living in the cave who would do walking meditation and recite passages from the Abhidhamma aloud as he did his walking meditation. And the bats heard the sound of his voice over many, many months and years, and it got into their psyche without their understanding it. It planted the seed, so they were all reborn at the time of Gautama Buddha as disciples of Sariputta and became the founders of the Abhidhamma tradition. To complete the picture, the 4th category is the unconditioned, the asankata nibbana, which is not to be compared with or associated with, derived from any of the other 3. It's quite distinct. The unconditioned is transcending of all the rest, the cessation of all the busyness and processing that goes on in all the other categories. Everything else, the other 3 are all conditioned. They all arise according to causes and conditions, and Nibbana does not. It's the unconditioned. And it is possible for Chitta to experience Nibbana. It can experience any kind of object. It can experience conditioned or unconditioned objects. So It is a system that is all comprehensive, that includes all aspects and modes of reality, and it provides a way of looking at the body and the mind that is somewhat different than modern psychological systems in some ways. It's quite different. One of the key differences to think about is there's no room in the Abhidhamma system for what the Western psychology calls the subconscious. Consciousness is unitary, Ekegata. It takes only one object at a time. It's not operating on two or three different levels simultaneously. So material that we call subconscious or unconscious is merely objects that the mind is not seeing, that the consciousness is not alighting on them. And that may be out of fear, it may be out of delusion, it may be out of ignorance. In the mind of a fully awakened being, an arahant or a Buddha, there would be no hidden material at all. In Western terms, there'd be no subconscious. The mind is completely illuminated. In the case of the Buddha, this means, amongst other things, it means that he had total recall of all his past lives, going back many, many aeons of time. He could bring up anything from the past. Whereas for us, it's difficult to remember what we were doing a week ago. So I think that's probably enough for initial comments, and we can have a short break, and then we'll take questions.